is already to me a small step into in the right direction, a small step into victory, because it starts with a decision, as we'll go through this. But that's really where everything starts. Is that you have to decide that you're going to protect. You have to decide that you're not just going to let anything flow in and out of your house. So we love to interact with you. There's a lot of information we need to give you tonight, and it's quite possible that there's a chunk that we might need to skip, but that's okay. We'll leave it in the slides because you could always go back and when we make this available to you, and there's additional links and different things that you could check out. And so who we are from Adam Networks is really that we protect people and the systems that people rely on. That's really what we do. We protect people. And I just right off the bat want to just say that, you know, you might not have, anyone who's listening to this might not have the same faith orientation that what David or myself has, and we're okay with that. But tonight we have to be candid and open with what we believe, because it's because of what we believe that we end up with the technology that we sit with today that can help to protect people. So I just wanted to preface with that. If you would allow us the freedom to just speak freely that way, then you know, and you can have the freedom to interpret this in any way that you want to, as long as you understand the aim finally is to have people protected from harm. So so David, why don't you jump in and just let them know, where did the journey start for you, and then we can take it from there.
You bet. Hi, I'm David Redekop, and my family and I, my wife and I, are blessed with 5 sons. They are Levi, Reuben, Silas, Judah, and Caleb. And you can ask me if we'll ever complete the tribe of 12 later, and I'll give you an answer. But in reality, we've really been blessed in having a long history. I keep on telling our sons, 400 years where our antecedents served the Lord in the best way that they knew how. And so our goal was to pass that on to the next generation. And so in that vein, we felt compelled that we would maximize our chances at running a homeschool environment when our oldest was about school age. And we stayed away from technology for a long time, as long as we could. And then one day, as we'd come home from a chicken farm, my oldest son Levi wanted to look at some pictures of the baby chicks that he thought were kind of cute. And so we went on a Google search engine. Actually, I'm not sure if it was Google back then, but whatever it was, I do remember that we typed in baby chicks. So you can imagine that some of those chicks were not the ones that we were looking for. And that kind of set us down a path of saying, oh, we don't really need computers. Maybe we could just hide in the sand. You know, maybe the Amish do have an idea that was worth the exploring, you know. And bottom line was that we knew that the internet, in its ready accessibility and perceived anonymity and total ubiquity, was just not something that was healthy for our children. And so we just stayed away from it for a while. But our journey began, and that's when the conviction started of us looking for a solution that would allow us to live and interact in a world online that was safe, but specifically for their eyes, so they wouldn't stumble upon something completely unexpected. So that really was the journey that started us on this path.
Yeah, and for me, I felt to warn people of the dangers, the addictive nature of pornography online. So I did this film called Willful Entrapment. And in this film, a guy goes online and a fisher goes through his finger, and wherever he goes, this line draws out and it goes wherever he goes, and eventually starts strangling his girlfriend. The more he's fighting, the more he's getting entangled in this. And then eventually cries out to the Lord and finds scissors and ends up cutting this cord, and that's how he gets free. So this really was a modern day parable. And I thought, well, great, I'll hand this to the church. They're going to be all excited about it. Pastors are going to take this and then show it to their men, and men are going to take this and show it to their young sons, and just break the silence, because 12, 13 years ago, no one actually spoke about pornography online. It was quite a taboo subject, especially within the church. What was interesting is that the church didn't want to actually touch this with a 10-foot pole. And the more I was doing research and the more I was actually teaming up with other people fighting, on the battle against pornography online, realized what the reason was. And the reason for it was just very simply that 80% of the pastors were already addicted to pornography at the time and they couldn't get out. And so this would just be opening a can of worms for them, and they had no tools to get out. And this is sort of like prefaces where we actually want to go with everything here. This is a scripture that has really been an inspiration for us and our team. Okay, you're the salt of the earth, but if this salt has become tasteless, how can it be made salty again? It's no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot by men. I don't know about you, but my Savior paid a huge price to set me free. And if I just do what everyone else does, I'm going to end up getting just as hurt as what they are, and getting in just as much trouble as what I was before I got rescued. Okay, so that is something that that became quite clear to me. I don't think ever that any of these pastors who got stuck in this stuff woke up one day and said, you know what, I'm going to throw my destiny into the mud. I'm going to hand my authority over, and I'm going to put my whole family, my marriage at risk, and actually put my children at risk. I don't think any of them actually woke up one day and said, this is what I'm going to do today. It was just basically the natural consequence of interacting and engaging with a medium that no one actually understood the power of what good could come from it, but also the power of what bad could come from it. So let's talk about digital gates just to understand that for a little bit. And so let's just look at the internet as a new dimension for a moment. Can you guys still see my screen? You guys see my screen? Okay, I don't see the green line on it, but I trust that you guys see it. So this here is just a sort of almost real-time rendition of cyber threats that Kaspersky is rendering. I really love it. Why I'm putting this up here is just so you can have some sort of visualization. So these are like real-time attacks that are taking place in the world right now in the form of some sort of cyber attack and so forth. But what I want you to think about and understand is that the earth is this physical dimension that the Lord created, and there's a spiritual dimension to that too. But there's this new dimension that we put on top of it. And this dimension is real, but you need to step through a gateway to actually enter it as a human being. As a computer, the moment that you connect, you can, a machine that you can actually interact, and there is a transaction that can happen on this new dimension. But for a human, what essentially happens is at the moment that there is a modem and a screen involved, it's a digital gateway. So understand that there is a gateway the moment that you put these two things together for a human being, or actually any input device, but those are the two main things. And what's important to understand is that when you step through this gateway, it's one step, and you could be in another part of the world. You could be in the middle from here, in the middle of Montreal, or in the middle of Brazil. But you also need to understand, once this gateway is open, it is a two-way street. And whatever is there, it's one step and you're in a brothel in Thailand, okay, where there's like child sex trafficking and stuff going on, but also just that one step, and that comes back to you as well. And what's also important for you to understand is not all of this is visible, because there is machine interaction, there is computer interaction that doesn't always involve people, okay? It's almost like this thing has got a life of its own, and it's scary to think about it that way, but that's basically how it is because of the automation. So, David, maybe if you could just talk about the layers of the internet for a moment.
Yes, absolutely. The picture that you see here is an iceberg. And just like in real life, when we see an iceberg above an ocean, and I've only ever seen one, and I only remember from my science classes that below the visible part of the iceberg is a much larger part that's under the surface of the water. And that's really what the internet is like. So what we think of as the surface web is what we can actually experience with our eyes, right? That is Google, that is Bing, that is DuckDuckGo. Those are search engines in websites and banking and news and media, and even Zoom is all part of the surface web because it is visible. But then there is a layer that's below that that we call the deep web. And in the deep web, we have content in material and services and webcams and thermostats and light bulbs and smart devices, vacuum cleaners, robots. These are not on the surface visibly connected to the internet, but now more and more they are. We already have more than 2 billion devices like that that are connected, that are talking to the internet, many of them unbeknownst to their owners, to China, and who knows where else they're connected to. And it's not that everything that connects to China is bad, but there are different laws, there's different privacy regulations, there's different acceptable standards. And then there's the much more concerning part, which is the dark web. And the dark web used to be a place that took a bit of an effort to get to. You had to download the Onion router or a Tor bundle or a special browser that could access the dark web. But because of the amount of anonymity that it provides, it became a gold standard for anybody who wanted to browse the internet with privacy. And so you can now, in a Brave browser, simply right-click, open up a new window in Tor, right-click, left-click, 2 clicks, and you're on the dark web. That's all it takes. And then any dark web address will work in there. And so the challenge with the dark web is that it is such a double-edged sword in that it was actually created with liberty preservation in mind, so that real legitimate whistleblowers that live in oppressed regimes would have a way of connecting online and remain anonymous and not have their nation state observers be aware of what they were doing. But when you have something that's that good and that strong, it doesn't take long before the criminals and the bad guys take a hold of that technology. And that's why today it is full of dark web marketplace environments where anything can be bought and sold, but nothing that is legal gets sold there. Instead, if it's a marketplace for everything that's illegal, because on the surface web, you would be caught by law enforcement. So they go underground, literally to the dark web. And so those are the layers of the internet.
Yeah. And so this depiction, where you have this little bit on the top that's the surface, and then you have this deep dark thing at the bottom. You just have to understand that since Brave made it so easy, and you now also with smartphones, the Tor browser is just as easy as to download Candy Crush. Okay, so since it became so easy, that tip at the bottom really somehow got bent and put right at the top too. So when you think about ease of access, to access the dark web now, if you're not properly protected, to access the dark web now is as easy as it is to use Google search on a Chrome browser. Okay. So how do we actually protect? So let's look at some domains that we can break up in order to protect. I was born and raised in South Africa, and there is a saying, an African saying, I believe, and that is that the question is, how do you eat an elephant? Okay, and the answer to that is one bite at a time, right? What we're talking about tonight could be perceived as complex, but I want to show you that you can actually detangle it and make sense out of it. Okay, so anyone who has a notebook, go ahead and draw a circle right now. And I want you to go through an exercise. If you have a notebook, go ahead. If you don't, that's okay. But just draw a circle right now. And in that, we're going to say that circle is all about content protection. That's the domain about content protection. That is anything that because of the media that it is can harm a person, that falls in that domain, right? So now let's draw another circle and let the two intersect. And that is security threats. So that is cybersecurity. And the place where these two intersect is where you're going to be protected against harmful content, and you are secure against malware and cyber threats. But now let's draw another circle. And the third circle is the one of privacy protection. So content protection, privacy, and security threats. Those are the three main domains for the external threats. That means that these are things that are coming from the outside through your gateway and that can cause harm. So privacy that is robbed, or harmful content, or malware. Okay, and so when all these three things intersect, you get this happy medium of true security, right? The problem is that privacy protection is pulling sometimes in a direction that is making content protection and security very difficult. For instance, to use encryption makes content protection hard. And we'll talk about that later. Something like Siphon that you could use in order for privacy protection breaks most of the systems that are out there to protect you against harmful content, right? But now there's one more thing that you have to draw. And now you'll see what starts happening. Digital addiction. This is an internal threat. This is just by human nature, the way that we interact with this technology and the way the technology is made, it can cause harm even if there's nothing bad coming from the outside. What we might deem as good and useful can become very harmful to the person that's actually using it. Now, if I was to tell any one of you guys to just have a quick look at this graph and draw this graph, man, it's a bit of a mind bender. How do you actually draw it? But if you remember that it really is, these are just 4 circles, and you can take any circle off and make sense of that circle. Now you can start properly protecting against these main domains. Does that make sense to you guys? So, David, go for this one.
Yeah, I was told years ago, never read what's on the screen because people can read for themselves, but I'm exactly going to do that. Effective protection is not achieved by just technology. It is achieved by a human heart finding the right strategy and applying the technology to achieve that strategy. We see so often how bits and pieces of this is applied, but the philosophy only works when it is actually completely applied.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So technology is not going to come to the rescue here. You have to understand that this is about a God-given solution, right, to a problem of the soul, really, because the internet has become a collection of all of the hurt and pain and goodness that is in the human state, the state of human hearts. That's essentially what the internet has become, right? So finding the right philosophy is the key thing to actually solve this. And to start out, you got to say, ask yourself this question, and ask yourself this question right now. Will you be a master or a slave of this technology, of this dimension? Are you going to allow your children to be a master or a slave of this dimension? Will you let tech dictate what is in your house and what comes into it? Just because it's shiny and it's new, and because Apple or Google made it, is it going to be in your house? And is it going to tell you what just shows up on that screen? You have to ask that question. You have to get to an answer, and then that becomes the root of your strategy. And then the next thing, are you going to let the tool tell you how to be used? You know, when smartphones came out, when social media came out, the guys who were building these things realized how addictive they were getting to the own tools that they built. When I saw my son come around the corner and watch an iPad that I was holding in my hand, and I saw how he got almost in a trance when he looked at the glowing pixels, that scared me, right? And then, are you going to do what everyone else does and then end up becoming just as hurt as what they are? So you have to answer these questions, and you have to come together with your family, because you have to do this together. And that's the first requirements for actually being successful, is that there has to be an authority in the house. Jesus spoke about the strong man being bound. And he spoke about it in the context of deliverance, but it's an aspect and it's a concept of authority. If the strong man of the house is bound, now you can rob it. right? So if the husband of the home is falling into issues of pornography, okay, the spiritual protection that's supposed to be under him is abdicated, it's gone, right? And or if there's not unity between husband and wife, and a strong man doesn't just mean man, it means the unity of protecting the family. So that's the very first thing. And if you're watching this tonight, or whenever you're watching this, if you're watching this and you realize that you are bound, this is where you start. Get unbound. Reach out to guys like they can be great help through FFI and Family Dream Institute. Start there. And then the next thing is to say, understand the true consequences of this technology that you're engaging with, right? Don't just use it because it's there. And then you find out that, like for me, I realized that I'm in Facebook. By the time I'm done, I felt bad in the beginning, and I was hoping to feel better. When I left Facebook, I felt drained, as if a leech sucked life out of me, okay? And I had to stop and actually be honest with myself and say, you know what? This actually sucks, literally, and I don't want it anymore. So actually understand the true consequences of the tech that you're using, and then make the commitment. So you're going to decide that you're going to go with some things or you're going to be without some things. You have a choice, but you have to execute that choice. Else, actually, by just doing what everyone does, you make a choice, and you're just getting sucked along with everyone else. And then find effective protection tools and make sure that you figure out a path to get them correctly applied. Okay. So let's look at what are the threats. And I'm just quickly gonna run through these guys, but I mean, it's quite obvious. You know, pornography, this is the acute exposure. There's all sorts of other content that is harmful, but that is one that's very, very obvious. So that's an acute exposure, not necessarily something that happens over a long time. Just one or two pieces of exposure can bring a lot of hurt into a young girl's heart or a young man's heart. And most of the stories of people who get hit really hard by porn, their stories always sounds the same. They start the same. They say, you know, I was very young when I was exposed to this, right? The next thing is the long-term exposure, like soul harm, and how moral values that could have been healthy and good for us as human beings starts being eroded because we are continuously being exposed to something that inevitably you are not shocked by it anymore, and something that you disagreed with in the beginning, eventually you become accustomed to it, and now you accept it. And then there's the outright manipulation of people's hearts and minds, and that is where there is willful misinformation or messages that are out there in order to exploit fears and fantasies of people in order to get them to do what someone else wants them to do, whether it's voting for a specific person or spending money, okay? So in that, the storytelling power of movies, you can rewrite history. Whoever makes a film gets to be God because you write the cause and effect of every story. You can change culture. And advertising, as I mentioned, using fears and fantasies. And then, of course, framing. So with framing, basically what it comes down to is just to say, you know, what part of the picture is shown to you so that you believe a specific aspect of it. And I think you guys will have experienced all of this in the last, I'd say, 3 months. A lot of the veil of this has been ripped off, and people are getting to see this. But this is also important, trackers and micro-targeting. So social media and trackers are an incredibly powerful tool for shifting and changing and controlling people. That's why, was it 10,000 kids that showed up with Greta Thunberg made her trip? And their parents didn't even know that they were there. And some of these kids didn't even, I mean, cleaning up their own room is a hard enough thing to figure out, but here they're out protesting, right? And then, of course, the psychological pressure that something like social media brings into the workplace, brings into the home, and cancel culture is something that you know sprouts from that. So someone posts something online, Maybe they didn't think about it straight. Tomorrow they show up at work and they've lost their job, right? These are quite imminent threats, actually. So that's just to see them. And then, of course, we spoke about digital addiction. The idea that this thing just keeps feeding you and you can't put it down. And then, of course, just simply the fact that there is more media online than there is time in the world for you to ever see it, right? So your time, by just engaging without setting limits, could be completely robbed by what exists online. So let's, David, maybe if you could hit this one for us.
Certainly. So about the gates and the channels that we need to protect, you almost want to think about this, instead of being gates to a home, is more of the porosity of the walls and how you can get air particles through, because that's more representative of how the internet operates. One of its original characteristics was that it was supposed to survive any obstacle, right? Even in the event of major world events, the communications over the internet was supposed to survive it. And that has, remained a characteristic even for bad intent. And so as a result, we now have so many more areas in which to be concerned around protection. So the first one is the realization that every screen is a gate, right? The Kindle is connected. The iPod is connected. It's not just the iPhones and Samsungs and iPads and computers and so forth, but it's also the Nest thermostat, right? Or it's the old Android tablet that you forgot that was gifted at some kind of an event, and it still has a Chrome browser on it. Or it might be an ebook reader that has terms and conditions section, which actually is reading from a web browser. And so from there, you can reach out further. So this is, if you're wondering how many screens are accessible, just ask your children, because Annette told us a story earlier tonight that when her granddaughter ran out of time on her screen time, she just went and asked for another screen because this one's out of time. There must be another one somewhere. And with our kids and us actively using screen time, we're experiencing the same thing. The home network is quite extensible these days, right? People are surprised to find out when they install a router and actually look at how many devices are. The average number of devices in America today is 50 of IP addresses that are on a network. Our average is around 197 of people that utilize our services. So there's way more devices than people think there initially are.
Mm-hmm.
But when we get to the multi-home ones, that's when it really becomes something that is a whole new dimension, because a device that now has Wi-Fi that's portable, like your phone, and it has LTE, now it can connect to your home Wi-Fi. But if that Wi-Fi is not available, it's on data. And if that data is not available and you're at a Tim Hortons or Starbucks hotspot, you've got a Wi-Fi there. Or your friends or grandparents or wherever it might be, there's always a Wi-Fi access. These streaming media devices, tiny little USB sticks that plug in, or HDMI sticks like Chromecast or Roku. These just go in the back of a computer, but they have built-in Wi-Fi chip, and they just get a Wi-Fi signal. Not to mention how many people get Wi-Fi from neighbors. So if you have filtering enabled, maybe your kids are good social engineers with the neighbors to get their Wi-Fi. Social media is a huge, huge channel in and of itself, because this area actually shapes people's worldview. It shapes teenagers' worldview extremely rapidly, because social media has a way of building a channel to them instead of them building a channel to what they want to browse to. It's typically the other way. It finds them. And then finally, the end-to-end messaging. This is where you have end-to-end encryption through the likes of WhatsApp, Signal, Snapchat, Instagram direct messaging. These are all tools that the modern generation is utilizing to connect with each other. And all of these carry an element of danger.
Yes.
Back to you, Francois.
Right. Because even if you were to say, okay, I'm going to lock down this device through a firewall or something, that this device doesn't have access to a browser. Well, the kids are sending, they're sexting and sending pictures of themselves via multimedia text. So if you have a talk and text plan only, then that is another door that you need to be aware of. That's another channel that needs to be protected. Okay. So let's look at tools for protecting the home. And the first one is what I already mentioned, the strong man. It is that authority, that is that spiritual covering over the house. And then take that and apply that into a mentorship environment. You have to have discussions with the people. If you are trying to protect people and you don't have the discussions with them to let them understand the consequences and why they are being protected, you are actually just creating an opportunity for the enemy to lie to them, to say, hey, dad's holding out on you, mom's holding out on you, right? And then there's reason for them to try and break out, trying to find it through some other way. And then, of course, we'll talk about network security, parental controls, accountability software. We'll quickly look at that. And we'll also look at social media monitors using artificial intelligence. And then the concept of digital supervision, which is, it really just means you are not abdicating your responsibility. So the nice thing is, what we're actually here to say tonight, we are going to speak about failures on systems and why things are failing. But you guys need to understand that we never actually set out to design technology. As David explained to you, he didn't wake up one day and say, hey, you know what, I want to start a tech company. He needed to protect his own family, and then he needed to protect his extended family, and then he needed to help protect his church, right? And then when something breaks somewhere else, we realized that it was a different philosophy that had to be followed. And anyhow, the net result of it is we now have something that we actually affectionately had to come up with a new name for it. Now, we still have challenges, we do, okay? But we call it the bright web. And so with the bright web, there's no pornography, no malware, no third-party ads, no spyware or trackers, and you have choices to limit social media access. There is scheduled use, so you can help manage digital addiction prevention. You can enforce things like YouTube filter and safe search. You can absolutely mitigate and stop phishing attacks. You can erase things like cryptojacking. It's virtually impossible to bypass, and there's no dark web apps access. This is what we refer to as the bright web, a version of the internet that the user chooses and that is safe. Not what the internet tells the user it is. The user says, hey, I want the internet to be only these websites that me and my family go to. And from those, I want to make sure that none of those websites are bad, right? So just so you know, and we will go through some solutions that can do some of these things. But just so you know that it is a reality, and it can actually be achieved. So David, maybe if you chat about the security side of things quickly here.
Absolutely. So from a cybersecurity point of view, the concern that we always have is how do our businesses get protected from malware, or our homes, or us individually. And malware today comes in all forms and shapes. It could be a drive-by incident where just because you happen to land on a certain link, or you answered an email that had an enticing link, nowadays you're going to find malware being delivered to you that is done by way of spear phishing, where you're actually sent a message with a topic of your interest. Maybe it's a message around ministry, because there's nothing that a criminal considers unreasonable. So if they find out what your real life interests are, and they can send you a message of interest that actually links to harmful content that causes you to download a PDF that then asks you for a password to your OneDrive account, or your Dropbox account, or your Gmail account, and you provide that, that is a mechanism of malware delivery. And it does affect everyone. in one way or another. I've had siblings, two of my siblings have had their identity stolen and have had their email address compromised. And all of this is possible to be mitigated by being more proactive in all of these areas. So that's why we mention password hygiene here. Neil mentioned that earlier today, that be important for everyone to understand that there's a reason why we go through the uncomfortable extra step of two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication. If you walk away today with one step that you can apply immediately, that is just to remember those three letters, MFA, multi-factor authentication. And you apply that to your email, you apply that to your banking where your bank allows it. And those are the two most important areas where you apply it, because that is, the email is usually the avenue of attack. And so if you protect that with an additional token, then that's always valuable. And here's the reason why. The criminals have very, very low bar to get your password. And the reason is that they have all kinds of tools available. They can search on social media if you have any kind of presence and figure out your last name, probably your year of birth, probably your favorite pet's name, probably your favorite child's name, or your only or all of your children's names and their dates of birth. And then they can build a profile that they then send through an automatic generator and say, combine all of these attributes about this person, about their country, their language, their faith, their favorite scripture, their favorite pet, and then come up with 10,000 combinations. Now, most likely, they'll have determined your password via brute force. That's one method if they know very little about you, but they target you. They could also just go on the dark web and say, I wonder if Neil Campbell's email address has already been compromised when Yahoo had their breach, or when LinkedIn had their breach, or when Microsoft had one of their many breaches, or when Google had one of their many breaches. Funny how we don't hear about those so much, right? Right. So whoever controls the media controls the message. And so the reality is that it's very, very easy for any one of us to be attacked. It is only, for many people, the only thing that saved them is that they haven't been targeted yet. So we can make it more difficult for them by just following good password hygiene. So MFA, everything, multi-factor authentication, and then use a password manager would be the second piece to walk away from today. Is if you have a password manager like LastPass, as an example, that stores all your passwords so that you only remember one master password. I know I'm throwing a lot at you today, but you will not regret taking those two steps, multi-factor authentication and password manager, and then it will guide you through proper hygiene to actually give yourself secure passwords on every service that you use by randomly generating a whole bunch of letters and numbers that you never have to remember, as long as you remember your one master password. And so that's what I want to leave with you.
Yeah. And so, by the way, guys, don't just use any password manager, right? Just because, especially if it's free, be careful. Only one password or LastPass or two that are very, very well vetted by security researchers to be secure, and that they themselves can't actually get access to your passwords as well. Okay. So one password and LastPass would be the two that we'd leave you guys with. We'll also follow up with notes afterwards. We'll send out an email afterwards with a bunch of links that could be helpful for you guys. So let's talk about content protection for a moment, and just say, well, why is it? Let's just understand how people get hurt by this, and what are the main reasons why they actually get hurt. Well, the first thing is the problem of looks like this is frozen up. Okay, here we go. Right. Abdicated responsibility. That's the first reason, is that someone just says, you know what, here's the device, let's just hope for the best. Okay. And I want, as we go through this list, I want to ask yourself, where are you on this list? If the people in your house that you're responsible for are getting hurt by content, by harmful content, is it because you abdicated that responsibility? Or you were making ignorant decisions about it, not fully understanding what the consequences of things are? Is it because you might be complacent with what's streaming into your home? The stuff that's on Netflix that would be considered 15 years ago, that would be considered pornography, Okay. Now that's just streaming on Netflix as general entertainment, right? Or if there's willful engagement from within your house with harmful content. And then, of course, the latter is the systemic exposure to it. That means that your child is on a device, or you yourself are on a device, because we ourselves are vulnerable too. You're on a device and ads are popping up that you didn't ask for, or pop-ups, or whatever it is, right? And so you need to figure out what are the things where you might be at in order to address them properly. And oh yes, remember this. I think it's the guys from the Conquer series that did this calculation, is that for Samson, when he went to Delilah, after 25 years of being a judge in Israel, he had to roughly walk about 5,000 steps to get to her, right? But today, and so there's 5,000 opportunities that he had that he could actually stop and turn around. But today it's just one click. So remember, the enemy is not playing fair, right? So so that is something that's very important, I think, to keep in mind with content protection. And let's talk about privacy for a second.
Privacy is dead is a topic that you'll find at all kinds of technology conferences. They're trying to convince the entire audience there is no such thing as privacy anymore. If you want it, you literally have to live off the grid, away from cell phone towers, with absolutely no way of being able to communicate. We would argue that you can still put a lot of brakes on this privacy wreckage train by not allowing the unauthorized access of its tracking. So we, as an example, with when someone needed a Quiet Walker, a resource that Francois coined as a Quiet Walker device, we realized how difficult it was, because we now know that there's about 5,000 data points that databases have on us as individuals. Mm-hmm. And so those 5,000 data points can be gathered in any number of mechanisms, right? The kind of trail that we leave on social media, what we do with our cell phones. The New York Times just published an article yesterday that showed what looked like a live map, but at a point in time in various places of green dots of everywhere in the country where there are people currently with cell phones broadcasting their locations. Mm-hmm. And so for that reason, we have to be aware that to a degree, privacy is still a right. And in Canada, we actually enjoy one of the best privacy laws. And I happen to be the privacy officer, so I had to get educated on this. And we're very, very strict with public policy around what we can do. So, however, it's only as good as we as citizens actually exercise that right. So mm-hmm. that privacy is all about minimizing the amount of signals that we send outbound. Some of that needs to be a conscious choice, and some of that we'll show you later how it can be automated. Yeah. But these are all the areas where privacy puts us at risk.
Right, and that could even be in the form of someone is not wise with what they're posting and what their information is available online, and now some weirdo is following your teenage daughter around because she's somehow connected with him online, and that's enough. And then of course identity theft. David also mentioned earlier. David, do you think we'll have time to do a demo on the all of the trackers that are actually firing up, like when you use an app like
we can do that now, or we can do it during Q&A if you like.
Why don't you fire it up, and then I'll see where we're going to skip, and then we'll just hit the most important things for the guys. So I'll let you. I'm going to stop sharing so you could actually share your screen from that side. Are you ready?
Yep.
Okay, so you grab that.
So what I'm showing you here is my actual iPhone on the right side of the screen. And on the left side of the screen, where you see a whole bunch of green lines, are actual DNS queries. So these are places, websites, web servers that my phone is trying to go to. And I have not touched it. And look at all the things during our meeting, this is in Eastern time, that it's constantly chatting and doing stuff in the background, constantly nonstop. But if I were to open up, say my Flipboard now, just to open up. Look at how instantaneously it tries to make a couple of dozen outbound connections. It just so happens that here, we're not allowing it. So that's what the red lines are. So I'm not allowing it to tell Facebook. I'm not even on Facebook. I don't even have the Facebook app. I had a presence there at one time. And here's a story I need to tell you real quick. We work a lot with Hutterite colonies. These are folks that live in communities between 100 to 140 people. And they live communally, eat communally together, and have a strong faith in their tradition. And most of them have never been on Facebook. One day, one of them signed up for Facebook right in front of me. And he was just shocked that Facebook knew everything about him already. And I'll tell you why. There's hundreds of millions of websites that have the Facebook pixel. Every time you see the little Facebook logo on a website, that's the Facebook pixel. So even people who've never been on Facebook, Facebook has some of those 5,000 data points on them, right? Because they know the pattern. They know that you go to this news website, you go to CBC, or you don't. You go to CNN, or you go to Fox News. They know what your leaning is politically. They know what your leaning is faith-wise, right? They have all of that if we allow that through. So that's why it's really important that we consider what we're doing. So for now, let's say I'm interested in this particular article. Look at how many additional red entries that was just by opening up the article. And yet when I open it, any place where there would normally be an ad, it won't be there. Let me look at Mac Stories. Every time you see a bunch of red lines come across the screen, that's because it was third-party ads. It was not actually part of anything here, right? This Fatherly article, again, it probably right there in the middle of the screen would be a big advertisement. That's not an advertisement that I asked for. That's not an advertisement I give my device permission for to pull into my screen, right? Last year, Google served over 1 billion malicious ads because the whole system is automated so anybody could buy an ad. If I know you're going to search for socks, I can buy an ad that says looking for socks, and then it's automated based on the highest bidder. And then I can have the result of that link go to my page, which installs a malicious extension in your browser. There's so many different ways that these cyber criminals utilize the automation of internet third-party ad system. I'm not against the concept of ads themselves. I go to the London Free Press, I see their ads. And the reason I do is because the local Free Press does actually serve ads as first party. They vet the advertiser, and so then that comes through, but not the third-party automated systems. So that was what Francois wanted you to see.
Yes. So, so David,
I can jump to.
I'll just grab it back.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
There you go.
Just grab it back. Yeah, we're going to skip over quite a few slides, but we will make them available to you. That's, for instance, things that will show you. There's links where you can read more about privacy if you're concerned about that, just to understand it more. It's really impossible to do everything we have to do in 1 hour for now, but we just want to give you at least a good start here. Okay. So David, let's talk a little bit about the common shortfalls that conventional systems have, and why that is a problem when you're trying to protect your home.
So thank you. This is rooted in once again in that characteristic that's fundamental to the birth of the internet. Back then it was ARPANET, which has this need to be able to survive any kind of condition. And so what happened as a net result was that we started to utilize communications over the internet in the open form that it was, but it didn't take long for bad intent to demonstrate the use of that same technology. And so then we started to take this approach and say, well, once someone gets hurt, we'll put a label on it and then we'll block it. Mm-hmm. Okay. So then that's what happened. We started to have spam, and then someone found a label spam and blocked the spam. We found pornography, and so someone found to do machine learning and look for pornography and block pornography. But then it just kept on going at a faster and faster pace because everything just popped up somewhere else, right? It's like a game of whack-a-mole. And this whole game of whack-a-mole of identifying a threat after someone's hurt and then blocking it, and then just to have it surface elsewhere, has been a trend now going on for 30 years. The only thing that's changed is acceleration. So today we find a million new threats every single day. These are the threat intelligence companies that collectively look for threats on the internet. There literally are thousands of people who have a career in something called threat hunting. They literally are looking for anything out there that is a potential threat. And so all that's happening is more and more money is going to the cybersecurity business because they have to identify threats faster in order to give people the peace of mind that they'll be safe. But really, all they're doing is accelerating the pace. But that whole system is not sustainable indefinitely for the simple reason that someone always gets hurt. And in the process, we have a political system, capitalism, and in capitalism, the only thing that gets rewarded is very short-wave thinking. Nobody gets rewarded for long-term thinking anymore. The only people that get rewarded are the ones that have a short-term way of generating more profit, right? And then so in the process, we have these companies like Cloudflare and Google and Amazon and Apple and that are incentivized to get more and more of the attention economy. And so as a net result, we now have technologies that have on the surface a wonderful narrative, like DNS over HTTPS is now supposed to be more secure because now the internet service provider can't see if you're going to YouTube or whatever, right? Okay, big deal. My ISP is the least person I'm worried because they actually are paying, I'm paying them to transit my traffic. But that's the narrative. Or security, that the taps on the internet pipes are accessible to the government agencies. Yes, if I lived in Iran today, or if I lived in North Korea or in China, I might be worried about that. The rest of the world, I'm more worried about the privacy breaches that happen as a result of systemic problems rather than but this is the world that we live in, where these big companies can create narratives around solutions that actually in the end up harming the ability for tools to protect. And so that's why we mentioned some of these that turn out to be the most easily bypassing mechanisms. So when there is a traditional gateway, whether that would be a Disney Circle or a router that has a filter built in, the easiest thing to do is install Firefox, turn on the DNS over HTTPS, and it completely circumvents that filtering.
Yeah. So
just or Siphon.
Yes.
It's like Siphon is such a powerful tool. You want that in your back pocket if you find yourself one day in Shanghai and you want to be able to access your Gmail, because Google is not accessible from China. So you're going to need a tool like that can jump over the Great Firewall of China. But by the same token, that's also a tool that can be used to circumvent typical filtering that happens in the home.
Right. So really what it comes down to is, as I explained to you guys, that there are moves made on the privacy side that are then making the content protection very, very hard to do, or making even security hard to do. So this is one of those consequences. So there's something called DOH, which is a new thing that is, as David had mentioned, that's coming out. The reality is that if you do that, then whatever firewall that was at the school or was at the church or was at your house, if your kid fires up Firefox that makes a DOH connection, it runs right around your Disney Circle firewall or whatever other firewall you're running. And you would have no idea that connection just became completely not protected by a firewall anymore, okay? Or as David mentioned with Tor, you can just 2 clicks and your kids can have direct access to the dark web immediately, okay? So we also already mentioned this on the human security side for making sure that you have your password hygiene done. And then now we're just going to run through a few products really fast that you guys can explore. It doesn't mean it's the only products that are out there, but we wanted to give you something that you can at least say, okay, let me try to do some things, okay? So Atom One, as you guys have seen a little bit of a demo of Atom One, that's the technology that we have developed in order to plug all of the holes that we have found, and also to run on a bright web approach to say that the whole internet is bad, only parts of it is good, and we are going to keep track of what is good. And what is bad doesn't matter that it's bad. It's not part of your version of the internet. That's basically the approach that we take. And we could do another prezzo at some stage that tells you more about how that exactly happens. But I would recommend you guys try, checking out Disney Circle. A friend of mine really loves it, and it works really well for his home. Just understand that it's easy to bypass with something like DOH or with Siphon. Atom One, a home version, you're also going to bypass with DOH or Siphon. But most of the time, if you don't have kids that are looking for trouble, and it's not, yeah, so you might get lucky with that. If you actually need to close up that hole, Atom One actually has a commercial grade or a commercial package that has something called Don't Talk to Strangers that will prevent this bypassing from taking place. The problem that we face is that it's expensive, okay, and it's required for someone to actually help set that up for you. But what we can do is actually refer to like Nerds on Site. They're a MSPs, and that would be trained in order to be able to install this software and install the hardware and be able to just help you resolve any issues that you might have. And so that's here, that the Don't Talk to Strangers aspect. If you need to protect against bypassing, that is the way to go. If you need to run a bright web environment where you're saying, I want to shape the internet for my home to only contain what I want it to contain, and I need the artificial intelligence to check to see that it's safe, that is available, okay? So a lot more to say there, but let me jump to, yeah, this would be good as well. So David, maybe if you could just chat quickly about accountability software for them.
Yeah, there certainly is. What connected Francois and I together years ago is that the fact that I was focused a lot, mostly on the technology side of enforcement of policies of security and filtering, and his focus was on the heart. And when it comes to accountability, if the heart is already ready and already wants to be protected, then accountability is very, very valuable, because then you're relying on a motivation that is very wholesome with very positive results. And so those two solutions, Accountable to You and Covenant Eyes, are very effective accountability tools. Their filtering leaves a lot to be desired, but that's not their goal, right? Their goal is to provide a mechanism where you can choose another brother, you can choose a sister to say, you're going to get a report about my browsing habits, about what I do on my apps, and then I want you to hold me accountable.
Yeah.
But keep in mind that if the heart isn't ready and looking for circumvention, well, then people will just go to another device that doesn't have the accountability software installed, right? So it is for the hearts that are already ready.
Yeah. The problem with something like this is it has to be on the actual device. So if it's a PlayStation that they're using to access the internet, you're not going to be monitoring that, right? So that's the shortfall that you have here. The other thing is that iOS, there's a lot of limitations on what it can and what it cannot monitor. You are probably better off to be on Android if you want to use Covenant Eyes in order as part of your solution for protecting your family. And then there's, of course, screen management software that are built into iOS and Android, and they've made huge strides forwards. But yet again, what you might find is that the kids find ways to bypass it. One example would be a child that says, "Oh, they learned that if they erase and restore their iPhone, it takes them 10 minutes or so for that process to take place, and now it reset the timer." So they erase and restore their iPhone every day to get an extra hour of screen time, right? And then there's also some third parties like Custodio, OurPact, KidsLocks, and Circle that will even give you like a graph. What is your kids spending time on? there's a combination. Some of them have some level of filtering, and yet again, the filtering is a blacklist approach, which means that you can only be protected against some of the known threats from yesterday. It's not going to protect you against security threats from tomorrow, but most of the time for content protection, a blacklist is going to do the job for you. Okay, so these would be ones to definitely go and check out. If you go to the Family Link, just do a Google search for Family Link or digital wellbeing on Android. They have instructions there. And we'll post links to the sites as well. There's also options for using spy kids, keyloggers, and screen scrapers. I would suggest you guys actually stay away from these. This does require you to know what you're doing, because if you're doing a screen scraper or a keylogger, you might actually be doing a bad guy a huge favor, right? Because if they can see everything that's being typed on that computer, you actually, when you do something like this, you have to make sure that you actually have a local server that collects all of that data so that it doesn't go out into the cloud. With what you can get between accountability software and screen management software, I would suggest you guys basically stay away from spy kits. These are more bad guy tools that sometimes good people could use, but if you make a mistake with them, not a good idea. This one is pretty interesting too. It's an artificial intelligence monitoring system. And basically what Bark does is the same thing, essentially what Facebook and everyone else is doing, that have an algorithm that builds a model about the person that's using their social media. What Bark essentially is you give them your children's username and password to access their social media accounts. You trust them enough that you do that if you make that decision to do so. And then their AI reads everything that they're writing and will flag you if there's stuff like bullying or potential self-harm or potential school shooting type things and so forth. It's a subscription service. Again, there's some limitations depending on what apps can be monitored on Apple versus what can be monitored when you're on Android. But these guys have actually had some fairly good success. I myself don't use it. We take a different approach when it comes to social media, but it's a tool that's out there, and I think it's worth you guys having a look at it. And this is important for you to know as well, is what we've done is we've taken the Atom One software and that lives on a router to protect your house, to then force that onto a mobile device. And what that means, it doesn't matter where this device connects. You can put a SIM card in there with that on it. You can switch it on in Germany. You could switch it on in Toronto. It doesn't matter. It is an always on VPN that is forced on the device that makes it exit in the cloud behind an Atom One secured gateway. So you actually have the ability to say, this device you can actually tell it what apps to load and to be able to run and not run. So we can run an app whitelist or blacklist and so forth. But the more important part is that every single connection, every bit that goes to the device and everything that leaves the device goes through this VPN and goes through the safety of that Atom One firewall that runs in the cloud. The problem that we have with this is that we can only do it in a corporate environment, because we need to use Apple Business Management to take control of that phone to prevent it from being removed, and that can really only be done in a corporate environment. So if there is enough people that actually come together and you form your own little corporation, let's say it's 5 families or a church that does this, then something like this becomes doable. But that is a problem that we face. We have a solution. The technology is working. It's just, it's not home friendly, because you really need it's a corporate setup in order to do that. But another thing I think is important to understand is we can take that same technology and we can actually apply it at a cell phone tower. And with Rogers, we already have things lined up in order to do it. If we have 250 people, they come together and say, you know what, I want to have my data filtered at the cell tower before it comes down to my phone, that this can actually be done, right? So what it will do is our basically our firewall would live in the Rogers cell tower or at their data center, and your phone would then make a connection whenever when it's at the house, it connects to the Adam One system, so you're protected there. Whenever it connects through Wi-Fi, it doesn't connect via VPN, it connects directly through cellular as it normally would. Whenever it connects through the cell connection, that data connection is protected. So you can set filtering for your kids, like everything that we showed you, what is doable. All of those things can be done, including protection against bypassing and so forth. So just so you know, this is possible. We'd love to chat to you guys more. If there is enough people that want to do it, we can pull the trigger on it. The technology is ready. We just need to say, okay, there's 250 people that's committed to doing this, and then we can actually do it, right? So what we would say for next steps, we're going to have a Q&A now, but the first thing is you have to awaken to the need for protection, and you have to then take inventory. Like what we told you here is about find every gate, find every device, figure out whether this thing needs to connect to the internet, and whether this thing and what should it be allowed to do and what not. Understand the technology, and if you don't understand it, get help. Because the thing is, just because I don't understand something, it's kind of like this. It's like having radioactive waste that someone dumped in my front yard. Okay, I could know about it, or I could not know about it, or I could even say, I don't even believe in radioactive waste. It's still going to harm me and my family, right? So if you engage with the technology and not properly protect it, people are going to get hurt, right? And figure out what's the appropriate take that you need. Do you need to use something like an Adam One gateway? Do you need to use, is your aim that you want to help your kids with managing their time? Then the Adam One gateway is not necessarily your solution, right? Then maybe Circle is the solution for you, right? Implement it, figure out if it's working. Create a way that your kids can speak to you, or whoever you're protecting needs to be able to come and speak to you and honestly tell you what's working and what's not working. Modify and adapt. If you need to change something, change it. And if it's working today, doesn't mean that it's going to be working 3 months down the line. Reevaluate. Something changed on the internet. Something new came up. Reevaluate that, okay? So those are the good next steps. And we've created a short URL for you guys, which will give you the this presentation that we've done, so that you can get links from it for now. But we'll this will be a short URL that you guys can remember or write down in order to use, and then we would in the future send that to somewhere else, perhaps where you have more resources and things. But this is a Q&A time, so fire away with questions that you guys have.
Hey, we thank you so much, Francois and David. It's been like drinking from a fire hose as we learn about all of these things. And just want everybody to know that, hey, we're going to do another one of these probably in about 2 months, where we're going to have these guys back on again. And you're going to get access to this internet or this webinar. If you have any questions, would you please just type them in the chat box? We want to answer a few questions that you might have, and we'll definitely answer those.
Did it do it for you?
Yeah,
Okay.
TFA.
All right.
I'll jump in right now
Internet
to
marketing?
Barbara's. Oh,
Go ahead, David.
sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
Go ahead,
Barbara
David.
has asked, what do we turn on Firefox? Maybe you're asking about Brave. So inside Brave, there is a open new window in Tor. That is the simplest way to circumvent most modern kind of filtering.
David,
But
I'm
in
gonna
Firefox,
give you the screen. I'm gonna give you the screen, David. So let me get to that now. Where are we? Boop. Grab the screen, David, then you can show.
okay. So in Brave, which is this browser here, if you just go to File, New Window with Tor, you'll then see that the system, let me see if I can do this private with Tor. See that at the top right? Private with Tor. It says this is a private window with Tor. And the whole background changes, and you're immediately in at that place where if you had a .onion address, I don't go anywhere on here. Oh, and by the way, this will not succeed, right? Because I am behind the Atom One system, so Tor cannot actually connect. But in most places, this is all it would take to get onto the dark web. I just can't on this computer.
Another thing that's important to understand. Let me see if I can share this screen. So, oh yeah, can you see my video? Okay, bottom line is the apps on phones. You don't even need a browser. You can have dedicated apps that has a built-in VPN and a Tor connection, and you just get it from the Play Store or even from the iOS store. Okay, so it's as easy as to get Candy Crush or whatever app you can. The kids can get access to that really easy. Sorry, David, go ahead.
No, I just realized that Barbara did ask about Firefox, because I did mention that in Firefox there is a setting called a DNS over HTTPS.
Yes.
In the United States, that is already a default. And so for you probably isn't, but if you go into preferences, anybody who's looking for this, all they need to do is click on the settings here. And it's this setting right here, enable DNS over HTTPS. And then in the United States, what you see right here is already a default. So every new installation, this is exactly what you see right here, ends up being the default for every new installation. So without even purposefully intending, they're completely bypassing Circle, the Atom One DNS Harmony package, for example. Actually, no, Francois, we have now built an automatic protection against that as of yesterday. So this
good.
aspect is now blocked even with the free product. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, we've got another question in the. I have mostly tablets my kids use. What can I do to manage parental controls?
If they are tablets that are iOS, the one that you can start with right away, it's called Screen Time. It's right in iPhone itself, and it works really, really well. Although it takes something to wrap your head around it, and there are bugs in it. One of my sons is trying to get a bug bounty from Apple because he found a way that if he does something just before midnight, then somehow there's something broken right around the cutover at midnight. Not that he's supposed to have a phone at midnight anyway, but one day he found out because I forgot to get it collected, because we collect the devices at bedtime. But that one day I forgot, and he found a workaround. So the built-in Screen Time on iPhone works really well. On Google, the tool that is there is called Family Link, and it's in the atomnet.io/FFC. So if you go to the presentation we provided, there's a link there for Google Family Link, and there's a couple other tools there that I mentioned as well that you can play with. Yeah.
Good. Another question we have: I have kids 9 and under, and I would like to block YouTube ads or preferences. Also, games like the Call of Duty. How can I do that?
Yeah. So with Atom One, you can schedule or block YouTube completely, enforce YouTube safety mode. You can completely block online games or specific online games, or allow them or schedule them, right? But the ads in YouTube itself will not disappear, because YouTube is the one that is giving them. So YouTube has a thing that you can actually sign up for, called YouTube Premium, and then there's no ads that are coming up on YouTube. But you have to then sign in as that user in order to have the ads blocked. What is that answering all the questions, David?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah. Another question: TFA versus RoboForm GlassPass. That was from David and Penny.
RoboForm was one of the early adopters of doing good password management and hygiene. Unfortunately, there's never been an independent security researcher that I know of that has tried to disassemble it to confirm that it is actually safe for use. The key requirement for a security researcher to give a thumbs up on a password manager is where they can mathematically or with code verify that the blob of information that the company stores is absolutely white noise to them, and there's no way they can get access to that vault. In effect, you're buying a digital vault, and you want to make sure that you are the only one with the key, that they don't have a secret other key. So I'm not saying RoboForm isn't good. I'm just saying it's popular, but I've never found an independent researcher that has vetted it. On the other hand, with LastPass and 1Password, they both have been independently verified by security researchers who have no stake in those companies. And so that's why we recommend those two.
And we'll have the links for those on the information email that's going to come out afterwards. Here's another great question. What does McAfee do for you? Microsoft tries to sell it to you on their new computers all the time.
McAfee robs Peter to pay Paul, but robs too much from Peter and doesn't pay Paul enough. So in the end, you don't want to have McAfee on the system. Anytime something doesn't quite make sense, it's good to question it. Microsoft actually has a built-in free tool called Windows Defender, and it turns out it is actually one of the best. Over the last number of years, when we as in our industry have thrown threats at the various antivirus software or endpoint protection on Windows desktops, consistently we have found 3 vendors at the top: Microsoft Defender, ESET, and Webroot. So if you want a commercial solution, ESET and Webroot are good. And if you want the free product, a very small footprint that's very effective, just use Microsoft Defender. It's actually not Microsoft that's trying to sell you McAfee. It's the computer sellers that are trying to sell you McAfee, because they'll get an extra $10 to $20 per computer. And sometimes that's more than the money they otherwise make, right? And so it's all about economics at the end of the day.
It's good.
Guys, keep in mind that something like that is only going to protect you against known threats from yesterday, okay? And for that computer only. And so that's just keep that in mind, that there is a big, it's the whack-a-mole game. It's the saying, bad guys get to go into my house, they get to harm my wife and kids, and if they're bad, I put a sticker on them, and if other people see the sticker, they're going to say that you shouldn't let that person into your house. Well, he takes his jacket off. What is the first time that he's actually done this bad thing? Okay. So the proactive approach is a far better approach, and that is why Adam One actually takes his philosophy very, very seriously to say, no, we say everything is bad, okay, and only what is verified as good is going to be allowed in. Now, I'm not saying don't use that additional layer of antivirus. By all means, for all old viruses, sure, right? It's an additional layer that's there, but understand that you are actually really quite vulnerable if you're just relying on antivirus, and it's not going to do anything to protect your family from content protection.
That's good.
Okay.
Here's another quick question. Is there an email that allows you to avoid big tech tracking?
This is a really good question. It would almost be worthwhile to have a separate section maybe in our next webinar just on this topic. But very broadly speaking, the tracking happens on multiple places. So first it happens in transit, then at storage, and then when you retrieve it. So all 3 places. The most common tracking happens when you are actually opening up the email in your phone or in your computer or in your browser. And that is when there are pixels that are in the email. So if you're using Gmail today, it actually does have a feature where you can go in there and say, don't automatically load images. Because what big tech tracking will do is they'll include a 1-by-1 pixel inside your email. And because we tend to, by default, handle programs the way they're given to us, the tyranny of the default, as we call it, then it automatically loads that pixel. And not only does the sender now know that you've opened it exactly when, even geographically aware, because our IP addresses tend to be pretty close in terms of geographic accuracy. So turning that off is probably the biggest impact you can have today. And then if you're using email personally, switching it to something like Proton Mail instead of Gmail, then you get the much more secure and much less tracking, because the company called Proton Mail is out of Switzerland, traditionally, even in terms of international politics as a neutral country, and they've adopted that in this technology space as well. And so they have a different business model that's not reliant at all on advertising. And so Proton Mail is a place where you can have a much more secure and privacy-focused email.
Wow. Well, thank you, David and Francois. This has been an eye-opening hour and 20 minutes. I do believe there's enough interest that we can definitely have another one. We will try to answer some of these other questions. One thing that Francois talked about is that we need to really look at dealing with the heart issues. And really that's what Family Foundations is all about. We're about dealing with heart issues that are in people's lives. And so if you're not familiar with Family Foundations, you can go to our website, familyfoundations.ca. You can go into the events page, click on it, and you can see several different seminars that really deal with the heart issues. I remember we were doing a Blessing Generation seminar several years ago here in Calgary. And there was a married couple, and one of the participants, they were dealing with a pornography issue, and they had tried everything they could to get, to stop pornography coming into their home and to, not do it anymore. But by going to the seminar, allowing God to access their hearts, to go to the gateway of their heart and deal with the root issue that was in their life, when they were exposed to that, when they were just a child of 7 or 8 years of age, and they were able to break its power over their lives, no longer were they bound by pornography. Now, I think even after that, though, it's great to have something like Covenant Eyes or something where you have accountability. But if your heart isn't right, you can have 100 accountability partners and you're going to find a way to go onto the dark side of the web. So that's just one of the resources. And so we would encourage you, you can check that out at one of our, on our website, check out on events, and we can, let you be a part of that. Again, what we wanted to do tonight is we wanted to kind of close in a word of prayer. And maybe you've been struggling and you're wondering, man, that was a lot of information. What do I do? I think the first step is to pray and ask the Father, Father, what do I do? What's the first step that I need to take in closing the digital gateway to my home? I was reading this morning in my devotions in Nehemiah chapter 2, verse 13, and it says this: I went out by night, the valley gate to the dragon spring and to the dung gate, and I expected the walls of Jerusalem that were broken down, and its gates have been destroyed by fire. And when you look at the Old Testament and you look at Nehemiah going out at night and he's inspecting the gates and he's inspecting the walls. And something struck me, I think it was Francois that said that literally these internet airwaves are coming right through the walls of our houses. They're coming from satellites, they're coming from cell towers, we're on a hub, and there's these waves that are all around us, and the walls are down. And I think that there's a positive solution, and that's to get onto the bright web. Most of us can't get off of the web and, get away from cell towers and get away from everything, get off the grid. And, there's not a lot of people that can do that. Even on the Hutterite colonies that David and Francois have been going to visit, they found out when he clicked on this Facebook that they already had a profile on him. And so let's not focus on the negative. Let's focus on the bright web. And the father of the bright web is God himself. And he has given these two men an incredible ability to help us with the Atom Network, other great solutions that you can do to protect your home so that you can be on that bright web. And so we want to just kind of close in a word of prayer and just to wrap up this time and just encourage you to just ask the Father, help me to get on the bright web. So let's just pray. Heavenly Father, we just come to you right now. And God, I thank you for each person that's been on this call and each person that will watch this webinar in the future. And Father, we realize that the walls have been burned down and the gates have been destroyed. But Lord, you've given us the technology and the ability. In fact, Nehemiah rebuilt the walls in 52 days with the people of Israel. And so, Father, we ask you that you would help us to rebuild the walls of protection around our homes. We are the strong men and the strong women, and we take authority over the forces of darkness that are trying to infiltrate into our homes today. Lord, we bind the strong man and we loose the light. We loose the bright side of the web so that we can use it to advance the kingdom, to watch good content, to see things that are going to be edifying and build us up. So Lord, we pray your blessing over each one of the people that have been on this program today. We bless their families. We bless their marriages, their homes. And we bless Francois and David for taking the time to be on this call with us today. And so, Father, we just commit this time to you right now, and we thank you for all that you're going to do. In Christ's name, amen.
Amen.
Amen. Well, thank you, everybody, for being on the call. And thank you, Francois and David. Let's, if you know where the emoji is, give these guys a big thumbs up.